We are recording the interview of Jonathan Andrews. This interview is being conducted by David Morse from the Wright State University Veteran Voices Project. Also in attendance is Louise Andrews. This interview is being recorded at the Crown Plaza in Dayton, Ohio. It is 11:02 a.m. on July 10th, 2019. All right, and you go by John.
Yes.
So, John, let's start off with when and where you were born.
Born in Bethesda Naval Hospital in March 21st, 1948.
Okay. So, somebody was in the military.
My father and mother were both Navy, World War II, and when he got out of the Navy just before I was born and went in the Air Force. So he was aft turret gunner in torpedo bombers in World War II. My mother was a wave, and when they ended up getting divorced later on, he married a Marine, Korean War era. So got all the bases covered.
Wow. Go from Navy to a Marine wife. Wow.
Yeah.
Man, aft turret gunner for one of the bombers.
Yeah.
Huh? Wow. Yeah. That's a gutsy job there.
Yeah, their life expectancy wasn't too sporty. So.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. Is he still with us today?
No, he passed away in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, do you have any siblings?
I have an older sister who lives in California, and my older brother passed away when he was 53 years old, and then I have a younger sister that lives in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did any of them join the military?
My brother was drafted into the Army in 1966, and he got stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, and they moved the entire 25th Division out of there to Vietnam, except for 4 people, and he was one of the 4 that went to Germany and got to play as a draftsman for his 2 years. So he lucked out.
Yeah. Oh wow. And then so before you joined the military, what were you doing?
After I graduated from high school in Michigan, my dad had been stationed at Selfridge Air Force Base, and he got an assignment to Dover Air Force Base with the new C-141s. He was a flight engineer. So after I graduated, we moved to Dover, and I went to college for a couple years. I worked in construction. I was taking engineering in college, and then eventually I ended up joining the Air Force. I enlisted from Dover.
Okay. And why did you decide to enlist into the Air Force?
Well, I'm second generation Air Force, so it only made sense. And plus, I wanted this job called Loadmaster, and I wanted it so bad that while I was in basic training, I volunteered to be a human test subject at Brooks Air Force Base, School of Aerospace Medicine. I spent 4 months there as a test subject, working with the astronauts and with weightlessness and bed studies, and I was the airman in charge of the 10 and then 14 subjects there. So that was my first assignment, was being an Air Force guinea pig. And then it guaranteed you your first choice of tech school, which was Loadmaster. So that's how I got to become a Loadmaster.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I joined the Air Force under the same reasons. I'm third generation Air Force.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a Loadmaster. I ended up being a weapons mechanic though. I didn't really get the choice on that matter.
Yeah.
But that's pretty cool. So tell me a little bit about basic training.
Basic training I enjoyed because all the tricks they try to pull on you, I already knew about them and what to do about them, and they didn't pull anything over me. I did get I got the Americanism Award. I was also a squad leader, and I enjoyed it. Had a good time. Our TI was in charge of the base color guard, and so he really taught us a lot about movement. We did all kinds of fancy drill movements, and when we'd show up at the chow hall, we'd go into to the Winds March and a razzle-dazzle box halt and all this neat stuff. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. I had a great time in basic. So always remember it.
Now, was it from basic that you then got your first assignment as an airman?
As the airman in charge over there at School of Aerospace Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
I graduated March 31st and reported to Brooks Air Force Base on April 1st.
Okay.
And didn't go over there to be in charge, but they selected me and another guy who both had some college behind us, and they initially put us kind of in charge, and eventually I became the guy in charge of the whole project. So I'm even in medical books for those renal studies we did. It was pretty interesting.
Now let me ask you just real quick, going back to the college, what made you decide to go enlisted rather than pursue officer? Because
I had met all the Chief Master Sergeants of the Air Force personally, and that's what I wanted to be. So you can't be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force if you're an officer. And I had a number of wing commanders that tried to get me to go to AECP, the Airman Education Commissioning Program. And I said, no, it doesn't meet my goal. My goal is I want to be a chief, and I want to be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force.
I see. Well, as a really high goal and an awesome goal.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were at your first duty for how long?
4 months.
4 months, and then
I went to Loadmaster School.
Okay.
Which was at Wichita Falls, Texas, and Shepherd Air Force Base. So I had a little problem there. In my second week of school, they found out I didn't have a legal flight physical because of my eyes. So they kicked me out of school. And I went back to the school to tell the commandant that, and he said, how fast do you think you can take this course? I went, I don't know. And he said, are you willing to give it your best? And I said, yes, sir. So they kept me in school and accelerated me through, and I was attending class, sometimes all 3 shifts of the class. And I did it in just over a month. It's a 12-week school. And I finished with a 96 average, which qualified me as an outstanding honor graduate.
Yeah.
And, so it was, and there's a long involved battle of being able to stay in the Loadmaster field, but I flew on a waiver for my first 16 years as a Loadmaster, a medical waiver. Finally they said, why don't we make this permanent? Hey, go ahead. So I finally got a permanent waiver, and it was for my eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's all I ever wanted to be was a Loadmaster.
Right. That's pretty incredible. I did not realize that the flight physical, the overall standards were, I guess, parallel to the Loadmasters as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the Loadmaster has to pass what they call a Class 3 flight physical. Okay. You know, pilots have Class 2, I think, but Loadmaster's Class 3. And the vision was the only thing I failed on. So.
And you had to be 20/20?
Nah, you had to be uncorrected to 2030.
2030.
And my left eye was actually about 2050. So.
Wow.
It was a battle I fought. I called my father when they caught me the day I finished school. The hospital did, and sent somebody to bring me over to read me the riot act. And so that's when I finally called my father for help. I hadn't told him what was going on because I didn't want to use him.
Yeah.
And he made a call to someone that he knew, and that happened to get to the headquarters MAC surgeon, the head surgeon there. And he called the hospital at Wichita Falls and asked them if they'd give a waiver, and they said no. So he called the Surgeon General of the Air Force. And the Surgeon General of the Air Force called Wichita Falls and said, "You will give young Airman Andrews a waiver. Do you understand?" Okay.
Wow.
So that's how I got my waiver, which I never got. They never gave it to me.
Yeah.
But I got my assignment to MAC. I was supposed to be assigned to Charleston Air Force Base, 3rd Military Airlift Squadron, C-141s. While I was home on leave at Dover, my dad said, "Are you interested in being stationed at Dover?" Well, that's where my girlfriend was. So I said, "Well, yeah." And he made a call, and the next thing you know, I'm assigned to the 20th Military Airlift Squadron at Dover, which by chance happened to be the squadron he was in as the chief engineer. So that's how I got to Dover.
Wow. Yeah. All right. So, and was Dover 141s as well?
Yes.
Okay.
At that time, Dover had C-141s, C-124s, and C-133s. They had one squadron of C-141s, which was the 20th MAS. Yeah.
And so while at Dover, describe to me just your day-to-day as a loadmaster.
There is no day-to-day as a loadmaster. It is what the world situation is. Of course, I was in training, so I went to the ground school there on 141s. At that time, they had no tech school for it. I mean, you didn't go to Altus or wherever. You ground trained at your base, got the basics of the airplane, and then you went out and flew on the job. So I normal upgrade to what's called first loadmaster, and if your unit is an airdrop unit, then CAM qualified, combat airlift mission qualified, take about 18 months, and I did it in just over 4 months. So I was fully qualified, including airdrop qualified, in about 4.5 months.
Wow.
So I did okay for myself.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. I also got to fly 2 missions into Vietnam with my father as the flight engineer on the airplane.
Huh.
And then we got caught, and the commander said, "You don't do that." So, okay. So we didn't do it after that. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
And then my very first mission as a qualified loadmaster on C-141s, I went to Thule, Greenland, and we were the very first C-141s to be bladder birds. They carried fuel bladders. C-130 can hold 2 of these 3,000-gallon bladders. 141 could hold 3, and that was the first time they'd ever done it. So on my first mission, I got bladder qualified on the 141. Resupplying a place called Station North, Greenland. It's the northernmost habited base in the world, and it's primarily Danish that are the ones that it's a radar site, basically a monitoring site. So we resupplied on an ice runway, and they marked the runway with hydraulic fluid because it's red. They just opened the bunghole on a 55-gallon drum and ran it on a pickup truck down the middle of the ice runway. And by the time we were done, all 3 of our airplanes were covered with red from the hydraulic fluid from the runway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty neat.
Wow. So then how long were you stationed there?
Well, when I came back from that mission, there was orders to go PCS to Southeast Asia in my V file. So even though I had only been there at that base for about 6 months, 7 months, I got these orders. So I wasn't even the most qualified person from that unit to have to go over there, let alone from the Air Force. So my dad said, "Oh, I'll get you out of that." And I, no, no, no. I'll file an IG complaint if you get involved in that. I want to go on that assignment. And it was to one of my instructors told me, if you ever see, remember this number, APO 96319. It's the best kept secret in the Air Force. And you know where APO 96319 is?
No.
Jingchuankang Air Base, Taiwan. That's how I got to CCK.
Okay.
Which is the reunion we're in right now.
Right, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Huh.
Yep.
Okay. Now, how many flying hours did you have in total prior to your orders?
411.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
That's the total time I got on C-141s. 411 hours.
Wow. All right. And now here you are going into the real world, I guess, or the conflict.
Yeah.
All right. So, and you told your dad, don't interfere,
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
Don't touch it, I want to go.
And what did your dad think about this?
He wasn't real happy with it, you know, knowing I was going to be going into combat, but, you know, that's what I joined the Air Force for. And so he didn't touch anything on it, and I went to my C-130 training at Pope, what they call RTU, Replacement Training Unit, and got qualified on the 130E model, and came back, went to survival school, and then took off for Southeast Asia and went through jungle training over in the Philippines on the way to Taiwan. They changed my port of call from the original date to about 2 weeks later. The original date had most of my classmates from the RTU, and when they got to Taipei, they sent a C-130 from CCK up to pick them all up, 40 crew members. When they took off, they crashed into a mountain and killed them all. So that was shocking, to say the least. So I lost most of my classmates from that RTU.
Wow. So danger was a reality at that point,
Oh, yeah.
I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I first got to CCK, the guys in the barracks said, "Man, you're too late. You missed the war." I said, "Okay, it's fine with me. You know, I'll still be stationed over here." Turned out I hadn't missed the war. It wasn't over yet. And I was there for the rest of the war. So.
And what year again was this that you arrived there?
Got there in November of '70.
November 7th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's still plenty left.
Oh, yes. And I was involved with most of it. Yeah.
Okay, so you arrived there. What was your first impressions of CCK?
Well, it's a foreign country. They didn't speak much English. It was barracks life in a foreign country is basically what it amounted to. I didn't get off base a whole lot at the beginning because we started going in country immediately. I think I was only there maybe a little over a week before I took my first shuttle into Vietnam for 3 weeks. And you know, they just put you right into it.
Oh, I see. So you have to explain this to me. So when you fly out, you then are on temporary duty in Vietnam?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And you said for 3 weeks at that point?
Yeah, we used to have what they call in-country shuttles. So you went down there for approximately 21 days, and they just keep rotating crews in there. So basically, so you didn't wear them out. Mm-hmm. So you come back, you may only be back for a day or two, but it gave you a chance to do your laundry and you know, freshen up your flight suits or whatever. And actually, when I first got over there, we were flying in our jungle fatigues. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it was it's pretty exciting, hard work. Flying C-130s in Vietnam It's hot, it's humid. You may fly as many as 18 sorties in one 12-hour period. So that's takeoff, landing, offloading, onloading, takeoff, landing. So you do that in 12 hours, you've accomplished a lot. Yeah. And I used to go down there, I'd lose, I go down there weighing about 155, and 3 weeks later, I might weigh somewhere around 135 or 40, because you just lost all your water weight, no matter what you tried to do to stay hydrated.
Mm-hmm. Now, while you were your shorties that you were flying, was this mostly cargo, or were you transporting troops at any point?
Yes, all the above.
All of the above. Okay.
We were doing our primary shuttles were out of Thompson Air Base in Saigon. So we would either be pulling alert on a day we weren't flying. We'd literally be sitting at the detachment there playing cards or whatever, for immediate launch alert. So if something happened and they needed a C-130 to go do something, you were the alert crew and you go do it. And I got launched off of alert a number of times for, you name it, either haul a bunch of wounded out of someplace, emergency resupply of ammunition, just whatever they need. When you're a trash hauler, you haul whatever, and you do it for as long as it's needed. So the only thing that limited us was if we were doing tactical work, meaning short field, we were limited to 12-hour crew duty days. And that's just because you're so stressed and have to be on point with everything you do. In 12 hours you're shot, you're exhausted. So they don't want you making stupid decisions then. So that's why they would limit that.
Now you yourself, while you were in Vietnam, were you ever engaged in combat?
If you mean was I ever shot at?
Right.
Many times, yeah. Yeah.
And this was while you were in the air?
Or on the ground,
or
both.
On the ground. Okay.
Yeah. The C-130 was known as a mortar magnet. So if you came into some hot landing zone, there was a high probability you were going to get mortared just because you were on the ground. They wanted to get you, okay, at least damage your airplane so you couldn't be useful anymore. I had a number of times, we went into a place called Pleiku one time, and we were a bladder bird, had 2 bladders on there, and was pumping the fuel off into a Vietnamese fuel truck, and the base came under attack, which was quite common. It was usually a rocket or a mortar attack, and they'd shoot 4 or 5 rounds in or whatever and hope they hit something. And I wasn't done offloading. I had my the front bladder was still full because you had 2 pumps, 2 600-gallon-a-minute pumps that you would pump the fuel off with. And one of my pumps didn't work, so I had to empty the second bladder off the one pump and then disconnect it and hook the other one up to that pump so I could empty the second bladder. When you have 1 empty bladder and 1 full bladder, you can't take off. You're too nose heavy. You'd never get your nose in the air to go fly. So during that attack, we're kind of in a little bit of a panic type thing. They cranked the engines up and everything, but I still had to get enough of that fuel off where I was safe to tell the pilot we could take off. So we finally got most of it off. I disconnected everything. We went rolling out onto the runway, did an accelerated takeoff, and just as we went to break ground, a rocket hit right underneath our left main gear. And of course, had no idea of any damage. And we flew from there to Da Nang, I think. Landed there, and there was not a scratch on that airplane. Yeah. So I had somebody watching out over me quite a bit while I was in country. I really believe that.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so how many hot LZs would you say you landed on a daily basis?
You didn't do it every day. It depended on the situation.
Okay.
Many of us here at this reunion were involved in the 1972 Spring Offensive. That was airdrop at Anlock and in a place called Kampong Trebek, which is in the Parrot Beak area of Vietnam. We lost 42 crew members and 57 airplanes during that operation. Okay. We also were evacuating a place called Kontum. So we were resupplying it and evacuating, and we were bringing in fresh troops, bringing out old troops and civilians and whatever. I probably did at least 30 of those runs into Kontum, and most of the time they shot at you on approach. We had a helicopter that ran into one of our airplanes and tore off 8 foot of the wingtip. We had 3 airplanes that did what's called intersection takeoffs, which meant they didn't use the whole runway, which wasn't very long to start with. And one of them hit the roof of a house off the end of the runway. Another one hit the roof again, and the third one never got airborne and ran right into the house. And only one person survived that one. So
Wow.
it was a pretty hectic time frame.
And so how long were you stationed overseas?
5 years.
Consecutively?
Yes.
Wow. So you kept re-upping?
I extended my initial assignment at CCK because I had been selected to be in a unit called E-Flight. It was the top secret unit. We had 5 airplanes and 5 crews. In fact, there's a number of us here at this convention that were in E-Flight. And by virtue of being in there, our families could be brought over. In other words, become command sponsor. Well, I didn't have enough rank to get the command sponsorship. I was only a sergeant. So I went back, got married, and ended up, we paid her own way over, and she had to come on a tourist visa and keep extending that. So she was in Taiwan 2 years of my 3 years. So
That helps.
and then when our whole unit basically got kicked off of Taiwan because of President Nixon's visit to China, we moved to our unit moved to the Philippines, to Clark, and we were over there 2 years.
Okay, so let's go back to, so you, at the time, your girlfriend was back home in the States.
Yes.
And you're serving. How did you stay in contact with her?
By letter, primarily. To make a phone call, a commercial phone call, was $5 a minute. And as a young sergeant at the time, Airman First, when I first got over there, I couldn't even afford that. That was a pretty good portion of a month's pay for me. So it was primarily letters. Ever so often I would get an opportunity to make an Audubon call, which is a free military voice network, okay? And so I would go through Taipei switch to Pentagon switch to Dover Air Force Base operator and ask the operator if they would transfer me off base to her phone number. And ever so often they'd let me do it, okay? So I get to talk to her firsthand.
It's nice. It's very nice.
So letters take forever, okay? You know, you ask a question and, you know, by the time you ever get the answer, that question doesn't even apply anymore. Yep, it was very interesting. And I think she's got every letter I ever wrote, don't you? Someplace. Yeah.
Wow. And so the times you were flying, and then you had times that you were actually you had some brief periods where you were back at in the Philippines, right?
CCK.
Or CCK
In
okay.
Taiwan. Yeah.
Okay, in Taiwan there.
Yeah.
So you were back there, and you had a little R&R there. What were you able to do for R&R?
Well, there was a bus called the Smoker that ran downtown from the base. It was a commercial bus, but I think it cost $0.25 to ride it either way. So a lot of us would end up going downtown. We'd see the local sites. We visit some local places where they served alcoholic beverages. It was pretty neat. You know, you're in a foreign country and you don't speak the language, but the Taiwanese are some of the friendliest people on earth, and they treated us well. I don't ever remember anybody getting robbed. Anybody. And if you can imagine young airmen downtown and not necessarily sober, the ability to take things from them was pretty easy. Never had an issue with that. So very, very friendly and honest people.
That's good. And then once your wife was able to, once you got married, your wife was able to join you.
Yep.
How then did the dynamics change for you at that point?
Yes. First of all, I had to purchase a car because we were going to be living on the economy. They didn't have any base housing, so we would be living on the Taiwanese economy. And of course, buying a car, that took a chunk of money. I paid $1,500 for a brand new Datsun 1200. Okay. Now it doesn't sound like much money, but back then it was. So bought that car so we would have transportation. I had to find a place for us to live, so I found a place that was reasonable, extremely sparse to say the least. It had Chinese furniture in there and not much of it. Our first bed was a papasan pillow that would go in a papasan chair if you could afford to buy the chair. I couldn't afford to buy the chair, so I bought the pillow, and that was furniture / bed for us. And the first bed I got was a Chinese bed that was so hard that I found this Thai silk material to use as a bedspread. And I put that on the bed, and you could walk across it and not leave footprints. Okay. So that's a hard bed.
That's a very hard bed.
Yes. But over there, none of us had credit cards. That was back when you couldn't get credit cards as an enlisted person. So everything was cash. If you needed a refrigerator, which I did, I had to pay for that up front with the Navy Exchange, order it, and wait for it to come in. Okay. So the first thing I did was an air conditioner, a reverse cycle air conditioner, which would give us air conditioning and heat, because the houses over there didn't have heaters, and most of them didn't have air conditioners. So that was my first item, was an air conditioner, and then ordered the refrigerator, and it took almost 8 weeks to get the refrigerator. So if you can imagine living someplace and not even having a refrigerator, it was different.
But
Yeah. So nowadays that would be called poor. Okay. And we didn't know that. We didn't know we were poor. We were newlyweds living in Taiwan, living the life. Okay. And probably the most wonderful period of our 48 years of marriage. Okay.
oh, wow, it's pretty incredible. So after your 5 years there, what then did you do?
Well, I did 3 years in Taiwan, 2 years in the Philippines.
Right.
When we came back from the Philippines, I was assigned to Dover Air Force Base and got qualified on my third airplane, the C-5A Galaxy. So I did that for 4 years in the 3rd Military Airlift Squadron, which was my original assignment from tech school. But it was C-141s at Charleston. Now it was actually had moved up to Dover Air Force Base, and it was C-5s. So it took me 5 years to get to my original assignment.
Those are massive planes too.
Oh yeah.
The C-5s.
Yeah. I spent a total of 17 years on C-5s.
Really?
Yeah. So I became an instructor after 1 year on the airplane, and worked there at Dover, flew all over the world with it, carried all kinds of different things. We used to carry helicopters, brand new helicopters, from Amarillo, Texas to Tehran, Iran for Shah Pahlavi, back when they were our friends. And that was a non-stop mission. You flew airborne all the way, air refueled 5 times. And next time you landed, you were in Mehrabad in Iran.
How long of a flight was that?
The shortest I ever did was 18 and a half hours. One time it was over 25 hours because we had problems with the refuelers and not showing up, and we had to wait out there. The problem when you're carrying third country military equipment, a lot of countries don't allow you to land in theirs. Okay, so you flew over the ocean all the way down the Suez Canal, all the way around Saudi Arabia, all the way back up the Persian Gulf and into Iran.
It'd take quite a few detours.
Yeah. Long flight.
Goodness. So apparently you made it up through the ranks quite often. How did that all happen?
Well, when I went to CCK, I was a 2-striper airman first. I made tech sergeant while I was at Clark 5 years later, and that was pretty fast. I had gone to first of all, I got a few decorations while I was in Southeast Asia, and they count promotion points, some of them. So that kind of helped me that I was flying in combat and stuff. I went to Pacific Air Force's NCO Leadership School in Kadena, Okinawa. I found out I had been selected for tech sergeant the day I showed up for school, and I was afraid they were going to kick me out because I now had too much rank to go there. But you don't put it on till 6 months later or whatever. So when I reported to the commandant in the morning, I was getting ready to say, please don't kick me out. And he said, hope you realize we're not letting you out of this because you made tech. You're not a tech yet. You're still staff sergeant. You have to stay. And I went, good with me. And I ended up being the outstanding honor graduate of the school, which didn't hurt my records. And then when I came back to Dover, I was a tech sergeant. I made master sergeant while I was there. Right after I made master sergeant, I got selected as what's called a subject matter expert to go write the promotion test for our career field. So a team of 5 master sergeants all of us pretty young. They needed somebody that flew 141s, somebody that flew C-130s, somebody that had special operations experience, somebody that flew C-5s. And I met all that criteria. And I ended up actually being in charge of the group of 5 of us that did that. While we were there, we met the Loadmaster Functional Manager at the headquarters, a guy named Chief Master Sergeant Kress. And I got selected to go to academic instructor school in September of that year. And while I was in school, Chief Kress called and said, "Are you interested in my job?" And I went, "Sure." And he says, "Okay, we're nominating you for it. When can you be here?" I said, "You mean you're not kidding?" Because it was a chief slot, and I was a brand new master sergeant. And he said, "No, I'm serious. I'd like you to come here, take my place." So, long story short, I went there a few months later. I spent, 3.5 years there, I guess, as the Chief Loadmaster Functional Manager, where I was responsible for the whole career field, training, assignments, everything, okay? Thoroughly enjoyed it. I had to travel around the world briefing all the air crew for the next few years. And I briefed both flight engineers and loadmasters while I was in the field. So, good time there. And in 1982, I got a requisition for a loadmaster for this Headquarters Rapid Deployment Joint Task Force down in Tampa, Florida, at MacDill. And it said it wanted a loadmaster fully qualified on C-5s, C-141s, C-130s, and special ops. And so I called him up and I said, "I know what you asked, now what is it you want? Because there is no animal like that. Nobody stays qualified on multiple airplanes simultaneously. You go from one airplane to the next, you end up losing your, if nothing else, your currency of flying on those." So we talked it over, and I did a complete search of all the loadmasters in the Air Force, and there was a grand total of 4 people that had potential for those qualifications out of 2,700. And one of them was a good friend of mine that I'd just given orders to the Philippines, to the 21st Tactical Airlift Squadron. And so I called him up and I asked him if he'd like to get out of that assignment. I had this fantastic assignment at Rapid Deployment Joint Task Force. And his wife really wanted to go back to the Philippines, which we had known them over there. So he went ahead and went to the Philippines, and the other 2 people weren't available. So it came down, there was 1 person left in the Air Force that met those, and that was me. And I was on a controlled 3-year assignment or 4-year assignment at Randolph. So I went and talked to my boss, and I told him what was happening. I said, "Would you be willing to give me a release?" And he said, "Absolutely." He said, "It'd be a fantastic opportunity." And he also said, "And by the way, I'm going to be the new wing commander down there at the F-16 unit there." So that was pretty cool. Anyway.
That's why I said yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I ended up getting selected for that assignment. I believe well, first of all, I'm the only loadmaster that was ever assigned to the Headquarters Rapid Deployment Joint Task Force. It became U.S. Central Command, a unifying command, while I was there. So I'm what's called a plank holder of U.S. Central Command. That's a Navy term for when a ship is commissioned, the very first crew on that ship are plank holders, okay? They own a piece of the ship, so to speak. So I spent 2 years down there, had some fantastic experiences, was deployed many times on classified things, and then eventually got stationed back to Dover on C-5s again.
Is Dover where you ended up retiring?
Yes. It's where I enlisted, and that's where I retired.
Wow.
I also got to go to the Navy Senior Enlisted Academy while I was at McDill. Went up to Newport, Rhode Island. I qualified to go to a sister service academy, enlisted academy, because I was in a joint command. And it was interesting. I put in for it, and when I got selected for it, I called the chief down there at the personnel center. I said, so how did this whole thing go on? He said, it's the most close competition you could ever believe. He said, you figure these are senior master sergeants or chief master sergeants, Air Force wide, which means they already have good records and stuff, and they're competing amongst themselves. And he said from second place on a 400-point system, from second place to 20th place was 2 points. I said, wow, that's close competition. And I said, so he said, now, then there was the first place person. He said, that was you, and there was 20 points between you and second place. First time I'd ever competed airline in anything. So I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm also the first distinguished graduate of the Navy Senior Enlisted Academy from the Air Force. Yeah.
Wow. That is all pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I had a very interesting career.
Yeah.
Wouldn't trade it for anything. Yeah.
Sounds incredible. And how many years total did you?
24.
24 years,
Yep.
and then you
Yep.
retired. And
Yep.
what rank?
Chief.
Chief. There. That's awesome. So
Yep.
you made chief.
Yeah. Made chief in 17 years.
17 years.
Yeah.
Doggone.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. Just that alone, I mean, just making chief in 17 years, that's something to be proud of there.
Oh yeah.
All right, so you get out, and then what did you do from that point?
I had a retired major who had his own business, especially advertising, who had run into me before I was even planning on retiring. And he said, if you ever, when you decide to retire, please give me a call. And he gave me his business card, which was a photographic business card. That was something brand new back then, okay? And for some reason, I put that in my wallet, okay? And I found out later, they said, you don't throw pictures away. And that's how he came up with his concept. He said, people will keep these cards because it's a picture. Okay, so he ended up hiring me as his marketing director. And now it's a nice long title for someone who sells things for commission, okay? So I had no salary. I worked for him for about 6 months and then decided that wasn't my cup of tea. I then went back to college to finish my bachelor's degree, and I went to a job fair a few months later. I had finished my degree. I was still going to school full time, and ran into this company called Hanover Foods, and I went there because there was a very pretty lady at their booth. And I thought, well, go check her out and check out the company at the same time. And there was an old bald-headed guy that was there. And we talked for a few minutes. They do vegetables and frozen vegetables, canned vegetables, some meat products and stuff. And as I was leaving, an hour and a half later, I'd gone around to all these booths. As I'm leaving, I run into this guy who's coming back from getting a cup of coffee, and he said, so, what kind of job did you say you were looking for? I said, I'm not really looking for a job. I'm not actively looking. I'm trying to finish my degree. Well, would you come see our plant? I went, okay. So made an appointment to go see there. He introduced me to the plant manager. On the plant manager's desk, it was a nice, beautiful mahogany desk. Had 3 pieces of paper on it with all kinds of notes and highlights. That was my 2-page resume and my 1-page resume. and he introduced himself as, he stuck his hand out, "Hi, I'm W. James Beamsdorfer. I lost sleep over you last night." I'm like, I don't know what this is about. And long story short, they created a job for me as their trainer. I started out as a trainer. I basically ended up being a lead person and acting as a supervisor, and I became their 4 months later I was the personnel supervisor, and about a year and a half later I was the acting plant manager. So I worked my way up pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds really good. So just kind of wrapping things up here. What characteristics do you think that you developed throughout your military career that you were able to apply after your military career?
I learned about goal setting, living goals. Gives you a purpose, it gives you drive, and you see results as you go. And that's been I learned that at NCO Academy. I didn't realize that's how I was actually living my life, and that gave me the title of what that's called, goal setting. And I've lived my entire life that way.
That's good. That's really good. Now, are you a part of any veteran organizations
I am.
right now?
Well, I'm a life member of the Air Force Sergeant Association. I used to be on their International Executive Council and Executive Committee. I'm a Patriot Guard rider. I'm actually a Wright captain. So we escort for funerals and special events, and I've done a few Arlington escorts from Dover. And that's what I like the most. It's heart. I'm a volunteer at the Dover Air Force Base Museum. I'm a mentor there for tour guides. I've served on their board. I've been involved in there ever since I quit earning money. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yep.
And then one final question. With this being archived and then it being able to be viewed by many generations, future generations, what message would you like to leave for them?
Be patriotic. Shoot. It means a lot, and it allows for future generations of Americans.
Do you feel that there's anything that needs to be addressed that we haven't talked about so far?
No, I think I've given you enough.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you very much, John. This concludes the interview with John Andrews. Thank you for your service, and thank you for sharing your story.